Well, thank you so much for staying with us here on the Rise News channel. You've just watched the first media chat of President Bola Tinubu since assuming office more than 1.5 years ago. Well, let's dive into the analysis of what the president had to tell Nigerians during that inaugural media chat. And I have with me in the studio Dr. Ibrahim Modibbo, political analyst and media consultant. He's also been joined here by Rise News analyst Dr. Amadi. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight. Special broadcast by President Bola Tinubu. But let me begin with you, Dr. Modibbo. Your overall take on what the president had to say in the last 1 hour. Focused heavily on the economy, talked about corruption, public efficiency or inefficiency, as it may be. What's your take?
Thank you very much, Adeswa. Good evening, Nigerians, and I'm happy to be here to analyze the president's media chat, which has taken us on a long journey of discovery of some of the policies and programs of Mr. President, to show to Nigerians. This is the first media chat. Honestly, if you ask me, I'll tell you that I've not been really impressed. For the mere fact that he has not been able to push the boundary that could inspire the confidence of Nigerians on the issues of economy, which is in comatose. Nigerians are angry and Nigerians are hungry. The issue of even the fuel subsidy. Mr. President, in his analysis, he has stated that he has no regrets. That's to tell you the height of insensitivity of a leader. A sensitive leader should have, brought out some of the silent features of some of these policies that are infringing on the fundamentals of Nigerians, especially on issues that have made them hungry and angry, and issues that have been able to dampen their morale in the cause of appreciating the fundamentals of democracy. Democracy is all about people. Government of the people, for the people, and by the people. If the people will come out to tell their leaders that, look, we are suffering, most leaders with sensitivity, most leaders with compassion, and most leaders that have that kind of the feeling of the people. If there's an issue that is bothering them that needs to be distracted, if you are going on a wrong journey of discovery, how so far you might have gone, if you find out that it's not the right way, you come back and retrace your steps.
Okay.
Now, under the present circumstance, we've seen that people have been complaining, people have been in want, people have been hungry and angry, but the president is saying that he has no regrets and he's not bothered. Issue of this tax bill, he's saying he's not going back on it, in spite of all the problems associated with this tax bill that people have been crying foul of, and also the issue of electricity, the issue of taxation, the issue of fuel, the issue of actually almost everything. It has not inspired confidence. Under globalization and multiculturalism such as ours, we are under no illusion to the fact that Nigeria is facing myriad of problems.
Okay.
And these problems could only be solved by a government or a president that has sensitivity, a president that has the feeling of the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians, so as to make democratic governance stick.
Dr. Amadi, the president did say that he has the capacity. He said we were spending our future and had no contingency plans for subsidy. He says we were deceiving ourselves. On the tax reforms, he says there is no tax reform. Any tax reform without an opera is no tax. Your take on overall assessment of what the president had to say in the last 1 hour?
First, I think he appeared to be alert and alive. Can see energy. So on the positive side, he came out as somebody who is alert and again, very conversational. I would say maybe perhaps prolific, a lot of words, he banded a lot of words around, sounded like a used car salesman, Sometimes quotable quotes were too many headlines, too many rhymes, but not too many reasons. In fact, it didn't sound quite coherent. Some of the answers were pedestrian. For example, he spoke about maybe cost of governance and talking about Nigeria as a large country to govern, talking about, you just have to, he talks about efficiency, effectiveness without relating it to the problem. I mean, presuming that if you are large, if you have a large team, then everybody has a job done. So it didn't, anybody who came there kind of worried about where it's going would not leave the conversation, much more enlightened or optimistic about what it's doing. Basically, no. I think at some point, for example, he talked about security. The first analysis that at the beginning of in 2014, when we had
during the campaigns, you said.
Yeah. 2014, when we had all those attacks, people suggest that we are not safer than them. No, it's not true. That's the beginning of the attack, and it was concentrated. Now, these terrorists are fatigued. Still, we can't defeat them. So, if you ask me, we are worse off than them, because that time was the beginning, and they expect a terrorist group to be much more concentrated. I didn't see that. Again, the issue, the way he handled the tax issue, it's true that tax reforms are going to be controversial, and he is right to say, well, in how he cut it, some people perhaps get the wrong end of the stick or the pulse, carry the leaking pulse. But the key point here is consultation. The key point is messaging, and being both sensitive, like I said, and strategic, to think around how do we present this in a way that you can get more consensus. I think the president runs away with this notion that he has a mandate. Yes, it's true, but that mandate is limited. If you look at the electoral map, he has a very limited mandate. And so this sense of, I've got the mandate to fix the country, and probably I don't need to concede or to engage more strategically, is a false one. Again, I hear a lot around, a president who is familiar with some words, sound bites, but really, he didn't come across today as somebody who has a coherent picture of his reform, how every piece comes together, whether it's subsidy removal, whether it's a growing economy, whether it's industrial policy and interventions to be more productive. He doesn't come across somebody who has a coherent sense of the whole economy approach to reform. He tries to justify some aspect of his subsidy removal. Of course, we know that the balance sheet of this country is poor. But again, you have to look at sequencing. Also look at, you have removed first subsidy. You are trying to subsidize everything. We're talking about free rail for Christmas season. We're talking about, so in a sense, the reform seems not to be coherent, because if it's about prudence, again, cost of governance, you 25 billion to repair house, the print has not in any way, there's a dissonance in communication around what he's saying and how the government has conducted itself. So not persuasive, not convincing. Again, people will go off. He started confident and then at some point overconfident and maybe arrogant in the way he dealt with some of the issues that required some level of sobriety, some level of, it's okay, but this is what we wanted to do. It may not come out this way, but trust me, if we do X, Y, Z, it will come. But it's just like, take it or leave it. I'm fortified in my belief and where I'm going.
I mean, given a country such as Nigeria with over 200 million people, the president seems to think he's done some things differently, because he says we cannot continue to do things the way we do them in the past. So in that light, will you give him a pat on the back as well? When he says, for instance, I have not resorted to the NNPC in about 3 months to carry out my obligations as the president of this country. Dr. Modibbo.
You see, in trying to break the barriers in order to define the narrative, we have to look at issues dispassionately. How does this issue impact on the people? While trying to build bridges, we have to build bridges across streams and rivers. You have to look at issues dispassionately with a view to having the feeling, that compassion once again, about the people you govern. Government is not all about yourself. It's not all about yourself. It is about the people. Now, looking at him scoring himself excellent, I think for a leader with compassion, a leader that knows his onions, he shouldn't have. To me, that's not the way to go. You cannot grade yourself. Allow the people to talk about you. If he goes to the street tomorrow, go to the street, do a vox spot, and ask Nigerians about the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Believe me, maybe by the time you come back home, you have an assessment of maybe about 10–20%. So, to me, I think there are issues that the president should have moderated, just like Prof has rightly stated. You see, there is the need for you to be moderate in approach to issues, especially if it has to do with the people you are governing. Whether we like it or not, Nigerians today are suffering. Nigerians are hungry and angry. Look at just within 1 week. almost about 100 something people died because of rice. This is novel. This has never happened in the history of Nigeria, right from the colonial period to the present. This is to show you that there is something fundamentally wrong with the art of governance under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The 7-man panel that I saw there, so you'd have even asked probing questions. There are some fundamental questions that I was expecting.
Such as?
Such as the issues that has to do with this tax reform bill. I think it has not been properly.
But there were questions, and the president did evade one of such questions to say that
he
I won't give you the answer here because when it comes to tax, there's a lot of negotiations, compromise that needs to happen, and that is happening at the moment. So, do you think the president should have let that out of the bag while he's talking to the nation? Isn't that the compromise and negotiations he's talking about?
No, just let me
Great.
You see, what I expected is for the president to retrace his tracks to say that, look, I've had the yearning aspiration of Nigerians. Look at in the days gone by during the administration of President Goodluck Jonathan. People came out to protest the increase of fuel to 65 naira per litre. After the protest and what have you, he retraced his steps and then he
Are you saying the president should withdraw the tax bills?
No. What I'm saying is he should have had that feeling of governing a people that have gone to use their own ballot boxes
So on the tax reform, because there's a lot, I mean, it's 1 hour conversation we're trying to compress here. What exactly did the president do wrong with the tax question today? What did you expect him to do?
He has evaded the tax question completely.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, he should have told Nigerians that, look, under the present circumstance, I'm a listening president. I will listen to yearnings of the committee under Shetima, the Governors Forum, and all stakeholders. I would have listened to them and then let me retrace my spirit and then let us have compromise by way of, forming a committee or looking at the issues dispassionately, having the feelings of people that the people are suffering and people do not want this.
Dr. Sam Amadi, do you agree with this? In other words, I sort of hear Dr. Modibbo say, press the brakes on the tax bills. That's what he expected President Bola Tinubu to do.
Well, I think, let me say this clear. The president, more than any other president in recent times, have undertaken very hard reforms. Okay, whether they pan out well, whether they are well-intentioned, whether they came from a rigorous analysis, we can all debate. I don't think that subsidy removal in one fell swoop was a good strategy. He was bold to do it, maybe bullish and maybe supposed reckless. But again, the result to show so far not so good. Two, this tax reform is a big one. I've moved from opposition to some kind of acceptance that the logic of reforming the tax, for example, removing income tax for payee for those who are, is a good one. I think the notion of derivative is a good one, but the problem is this. It's not a technical solution to say, oh, we do this, we reform the tax. This is not a tax policy, it's a revenue sharing policy at heart. And therefore, it requires a more strategic communication and engagement with stakeholders. It also requires alignment with the Nigerian sharing formula. I mean, you can't just do one side. We share revenue on a formula. Now, if that formula is invariably, in my view, inefficient, clearly, they have to have a conversation that's broader to say, look, we have to move to a much more borrowing P2B's language from consumption to production. You don't just fix it to only tax. And again, when people are perceiving that some sections are going to win and lose, and the section that's reportedly going to win is the president's section, so to say, you owe a moral duty to reach out and to be much more transparent. I think that Oyedele is doing a better job of engagement and speaking to these issues. I don't expect the president to go to details, but again, he should. Attunement, you see, the emotional quotient of his speech is very poor, very low. He sat there like a colossus, unmoved, unperturbed, untouched. But you should actually, without going into detail, say, look, you know what, this is what we want to do. We want to save our country. But we know there will be difficulties. We intend to engage all these stakeholders and show our hand. That level of, it follows from his campaign. He didn't care about engaging. It was his turn, he's going to win it, and now it seems like, I'm going to get this done. Now, the president also, sees himself as, his model of leadership, he says, is tough guy, firmness, but firmness is preceded by rigor, by engagement. So when you first consult and get their best science, evidence, then when you not decide, it cannot be firm. So I think there's something missing here. The idea that if you're tough, you know, you are better off. So far, these policies are not adding up, or at least there are several gaps. The other issue around evasion, I mean, part of this conversation should be presidents trying to evade questions, which is normal, because especially when you're weak on those issues, try to evade them. It's the job of the interlocutors to press on, and they didn't do a good job. I think it was really a much more, they sounded like old, like, you know, the halo was too much, and they were differential. We know that presidential charts, you arrange people are going to be differential, but again, for me, there's too much difference, and there were softballs, too many, and no pickup to say, okay, push back. I think the exception to me would be the lady from whatever, the dark lady. She sounded more kind of, you know, inclined to follow up with questions and to probe better. But on the whole, in the next phase, this is a president who clearly shows that he is smart, street smart, even more street smart and more policy smart. So he takes on these words, he brand them, he hit them, efficiency. He talks about, you know, things that sounds like a psychology teacher or a preacher in the church. But look, the point is you have to come out clear and provide motivation. So far, he didn't speak to the fact that these reforms, whether they are well-meaning or not, are not addressing the issue. The rising inflation, the poverty, the sense of insecurity that still subsists in spite of
all right. So let's talk about the budget and cost of governance, because that's another thing that was focused on during this chart. The president outlined ambitious goals, and such as local production, talked about tax incentives to attract those foreign direct investments he talks so much about, his administration is big on. But are this really feasible, Dr. Modibbo? When you hear the president speak so passionately about agriculture, giving security to farmers so that they can return to the farm, in addressing inflation, which is huge on food inflation, taking the bulk of it. Are you convinced at all when the president talks about those measures to improve production, manufacturing, and deal with inflation?
You see, in trying to bridge the gaps and then shorten the distances, I want to believe that the president should have come out under the present circumstances to inform, educate, and even set an agenda to Nigerians on the modus operandi of this government, how he intends to run this government in the next 2 years or so, because already 2 years have gone. And therefore, he's saying that the borrowing should continue. As of today, I cannot see any improvement in terms of social infrastructure, especially the roads. From Lagos coming down to the north, to the east, almost all the roads are bad. The roads is only on the lips or on the news. I mean, I've seen the Minister of Works only talking as the newspaper tiger.
You haven't seen the Lagos Calabar?
No, has it even taken off? In the next 4 years, where is it going? The most fundamental thing is not that road at the moment. Although I'm not saying that road is bad, no. But the present condition of our roads in Nigeria today is very pitiable. Go to everywhere, it takes you from here to Yola about 20 hours. From here to Kaduna, almost everywhere the roads are broken down completely. Now, looking at the issue of manufacturers, if you talk of the manufacturing industry today, right from the time when the president came on board, tell me how many investors has he been able to bring to Nigeria? Because the cost of living, the devaluation of the naira, floating, the issue of this petrol, and it has driven almost all of the manufacturers. And therefore, Nigeria were left to carry the can. Most of their industries have collapsed. Social infrastructure have actually collapsed. Now, we're talking of bringing in people to manufacture. Manufacture what? Under the present circumstances, and even saying that you are feeding people with 70,000. 70,000 cannot. I went to buy granola oil, that 25 liter. It was 95,000. So for God's sake, for somebody, there's a salary earner. You have about 4 children. How do you send them to school? How do you eat? Even Gary now. Is it for the common man? As far as I'm concerned, the president has history behind him. He has history at his beck and call. Let him sit down, make a very positive impact on the lives of Nigerians. Because to me, right from day one, when he came to say subsidy is gone, just like Prof has rightly stated, he did not sit down with economists with sound knowledge of econometrics that could bring succor or propel Nigeria to greatness. He said subsidy is gone. A leader, you are not a tiger to assume tigritude or as a leader, you want to show that, look, you are powerful, and even military dictators, they don't sound like this. As a civilian, you should sit down, analyze things, have compassion, have regard and feeling for your people. Think of how to propel the progress of governance to rhyme and to be in sync with the problems and aspirations of Nigeria, especially putting food on their table, giving them security. For whoever tells the president that there is security today in Nigeria, he's not telling him the truth.
Dr.
Go to the Northwest and see.
The president says borrowing is not criminal. When asked about cost of governance, particularly his large cabinet, which is the largest in Nigeria's history of 48 ministers, he says they are efficient, they are effective, and is not ready to streamline his cabinet. How did you feel about that? And he did say that Nigeria is a big country and you do need the hands to govern.
You could actually govern 33 million people, perhaps with the same number of people with 50 million. So it's not per capita. You're not matching ministers per capita. But again, but then I think it was disappointing his approach to that question. Yes, taxes, borrowing is necessary at this point, and the president made a case that they're borrowing for infrastructure. That's the stock of infrastructure in Nigeria is very low. The need to finance it is very high, and we admit that there will be time lag between the investment they're doing, perhaps, and like my panelist said, see the result. But I think that two things. One is that the profile of prudence. I mean, the stock of infrastructure not diminishing also is a function also of corruption. So in the past, we can spend 5 billion naira, 500 billion, and then get 220 billion worth of value. So I'm not convinced at the men at the helm of fair, whether it's the Minister of FCT or the Minister of Works, it doesn't seem to me that the quality of team the president has put together, in my view, it does not carry the message of prudence well. I mean, you need to match the team, performance, behavior, history, profile. Because the print is at when the juncture where the print is summoning us to prudence. It says, look, we need to bite this bullet. You want to see that the government itself is leading in prudence, in transparency. The procurement policy of this government is actually becoming worse. I've had to have cases where contracts awarded in previous government under Buhari are re-awarded to people, the same BPP. So there's a doubt as to the fiscal rigor of this government. Then, so in terms of the borrowing, I think maybe we've not overborrowed GDP to debt ratio, but the debt to service and debt to revenue is prohibitive. Now, the productivity talks about productivity growth, especially in agriculture. The problem here is that the incentives are not aligned. So take, for example, manufacturing, okay? Oh, yeah. Industrialization. The energy cost is high. Devaluation is impacting on cost of input, and then shrinking maybe capacity growth industry, affecting pricing, which itself makes it less competitive. Just 2 days ago, the World Intellectual Property Organization issued the Innovation Index. In the lower and middle income countries, where Nigeria falls, in lower middle income country, Nigeria is not even in the top. Cote d'Ivoire, all these are ahead of us. So the president should sit back and say, if you want to spark productivity gain. Okay. How do I align all this incentive structure? Because so far, the incentives are not aligned. The industrial policy plan of this government is not aligned. And you see, you move this way, it takes 3 steps backwards in terms of what government is doing. So yes, I think I agree with the president that we need bullish, bold, perhaps difficult reforms. But the question is the good faith, the trust with the public, because this is a journey that you need trust, public trust. And that trust is not enhanced when it looks like government is working against the people. I would have wanted them to talk about the growing trend of arrest and detention and persecution that the police is not getting involved. How does that...
Freedom of speech, rule of law.
Exactly. How does that help to unleash innovation, which should be at the heart of this productivity growth?
We have to wrap up, but there's something, both of you, a common thread, and it was brought up during that conversation, leakages and corruption. The president was particular because they did ask him about the military. We continuously see an increase in the budget for the military, but there seems to be a misalignment or a mismatch with what we're spending and the results we're getting.
Absolutely.
And so that question was put to the president, and he did say, do not insult the institution. He's proud of what the military is doing, and there will be no probe of that. But speaking about corruption largely, he did say that there's a mechanism his administration has put in place to ensure that monies budgeted are spent on what they're supposed to be spent on. Were you convinced? I mean, your take.
Well, if you ask me about the profiling, of corruption index under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I will not blame him, because to me, corruption has not been one of the fundamentals of issues that he has been able to come on board with. Yeah. Unlike Buhari, that had corruption, fighting corruption, one of his cardinal
principles.
Although he failed, yes, Buhari failed. But President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did not mince words. He did not even say that, look, he's bothered with corruption. That's why when that question was posed, I was thinking he will give Nigerians hope that, look, under my governor or my government, I'm not going to tolerate that, and I will not allow anybody to be corrupt. And the possibility of probing the corruption this thing is much on ground.
It's not enough to say you have a mechanism in place that works, that ensures there's no leakages?
You see, this one, I think to me, they are just cosmetic structures.
Okay.
I believe that there should have been serious policy framework within the government, within the governance structure. Look, apart from even corruption index in terms of economy, even look at even the appointments. It has been shrewd to a section of this country, which is corruption. As far as we're concerned, Nigeria is a federation. A lot of our friends, when we discuss, sometimes we feel as if we're in a Oduduwa Republic, because virtually almost all appointments are shrewd to one section of the country.
All right.
And every section of this country has given the president the mandate to be president. It's not a one section of this
Dr.
country.
Modibbo, we have to go. His administration has denied that report several times, but your final word, Dr. Sam Amadi.
Well, I think the president is not very keen on history, profile, antecedent on corruption. So I'm not expecting him to be bullish on corruption. Again, the issue around security, you can see President Tinubu is different from candidate Tinubu or opposition Tinubu. When he was opposition leader, he didn't quite show that level of patriotism in attacking the Jonathan government on their failure. In the last 8 years, we've not seen success, or 9 years, in security. So he may be right to say we're not going to probe these guys because that's not what he wants to do. But on the question of corruption, I think the central issue here is that the president himself has not shown any passion or keenness to address that issue for good reason. But the critical issue here is that the way he dismissed this question around corruption and leakages and talking about they need to have a sizable cabinet undermines the confidence and support for what may look like fiscal prudence that is pushing. You can't push fiscal prudence when you are supervising and happily to,
it does sound like a paradox.
Exactly.
Indeed. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Dr. Ibrahim Modibbo is a political analyst and media consultant, and Dr. Sam Amadi is a Rise News analyst. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the inaugural presidential chats by President Bola Tinubu. Thank you.